Now, can I really do a HINDASH video if I don't start the video off with my dog on my lap? If you haven't met her, this is Luna, and she is quite possibly the sweetest girl in the world. Hey makeup friends, I'm excited to do this video because today we're going to be playing with the Beautopsy palette from HINDASH. Now I have to admit that I was fully intimidated by this palette when I first saw pictures of it, and I really didn't think that I would have the skill set to be able to maximize the use out of it. But I picked it up nonetheless, and I have got some thoughts to share with you. Let's get into this. As always, I want to start off by welcoming you back to my channel, or if you are new here, then hello and welcome. My name is Kara, and on my channel we like to mix beauty, brains, and the occasional F-bomb. Now, makeup. I like to talk about what's on my face at the beginning of the video, but it's pretty much all the Beautopsy palette. So I've used this palette as my bronzer, my contour, highlight, and blush, as well as on my eyes. I am going to be inserting little clips of the application as we go through the video, but before we get to that, I want to give you some information on the palette and on HINDASH himself. I'm going to link HINDASH's YouTube channel in the description box, and I strongly encourage you to go and check it out if you're not already subscribed to him. He does incredibly in-depth tutorials and really explains the placement of the shadows, the color selection, and really focuses on the theory of makeup artistry. And I've just learned so much from watching his videos. And also, let's not lie, he's really easy on the eyes, and his voice is so incredibly calming. So definitely go and check him out. You're not going to find like a lot of amped up energy. He's just very chill, and it's just a pleasure to watch his videos, to be honest. I'm also going to give you some information about him straight from the website. And it says Mohammed Hindash is an artist born and raised in Dubai. He studied and graduated with a degree in studio art and later gained his exposure internationally for being one of the leading pioneers in makeup artistry and photography. And I think the fact that he has such a solid basis as an artist and painter really translates when we look at the functionality of this palette, which I'm going to get into in a moment. And I find even just in looking at different Instagram accounts, and certainly here on YouTube as well, there is a bit of a difference between somebody who is a makeup artist and somebody who is an artist and has translated those skills into makeup. And I think that makeup just becomes another medium for them, and the true artistry really shows through. And that's not to downplay or to take anything away from people who are makeup artists. Everybody has their own skill set and everybody brings something unique to the table. But I really think that HINDASH's foundational understanding of artistry and of color and all of those concepts, I think that it really plays well in this palette and really comes through. So let's take a look at this palette. So if you haven't seen it, this is what it looks like on the inside. And as you can see, there are 6 pans and each one has a gradient. So on the website, it says that it basically translates into 24 colors of payoff, although of course with a gradient, there could be more if there's very minute differentiation, but at any rate, the website says 24, so who am I to argue with? And in looking at the shades in here, you can really see that there is a mixed bag. There are certainly warmer tones, and then you have the cooler tones over here and some more neutral options as well. When I first saw this, as I said in the intro, I was thoroughly intimidated by it. It is very much an artist's palette created by an artist. And because I don't have that skill set, I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to master the palette, to be honest, or that I'd even really be able to conceptualize how to use it. And yet, now that I've had an opportunity to play with it a few times, this is such a user-friendly palette. These pigments that are in here are really gentle to apply. And what I mean by that is even when you're going in with these bright red shades, it doesn't go on full impact like that. When I think pressed pigments, I often think of super saturated colors that apply fully pigmented. And that's not the case here. But the distinction being, they're also not disappointing. I mean, sometimes when you get an eyeshadow or pigment that applies really patchy or is just really powdery and just lacks that color payoff, no matter how many times you layer it up, it's never going to intensify. That's not the case here. So you can go in with a really light hand and then just build those shadows up. And actually, having said that, you don't even really have to go in with a particularly light hand. It's a very forgiving formula. And as a consumer, I really appreciate that because it just makes this palette that much more accessible for me. I know going into it, even if I dip into the brightest part of the red, that it's not going to overwhelm anything else that's going on, that I can blend it out and I can build it up to match the intensity that I want it at. And frankly, the selection of tones that are in here are also fantastic. It works as a blush, it works as a bronzer, it works as a contour, and because there is this gradient, and because there are so many different depths of shades in here, it's going to work for a lot of different skin tones. So when I look at this palette, the word that I keep coming back to is intelligent. It is so intelligently put together. You can tell that there was a lot of thought put into this, not only in the formula, but also in those gradient options, and frankly, the fact that it's a gradient to begin with. I absolutely love this palette. There, I'm not even going to wait to the end to tell you my final thought. There it is right there. I can see this being an absolute staple in my collection. Last thought before I tell you about my experience applying it for this look today is that there are a lot of tutorials from HINDASH himself on his channel using this palette. And again, I strongly encourage you to check them out because I have walked away from a lot of knowledge about the product itself just watching those videos. Not even necessarily in the application of it, but just in terms of the formula itself. For example, in a recent video that I watched of his, he was saying because it's a pressed pigment, going in with your finger can actually disturb the formula because the oils in your finger can seep into those pigments and just basically mess it up. So I'm not going to be doing finger swatches, and frankly, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do that with a gradient to begin with, so I'm kind of glad for the divine intervention, to be honest, but it's good to know just those sort of nuanced things about the palette. Also, as I'm talking, I'm just thinking there's a little sticker on the back that says that this is 100% vegan, despite having those red and pink shades in there. So if you are vegan, this is a vegan-friendly palette. Now, the last video that I watched of HINDASH, he was saying that he's trying to find some models that have hooded eyes. And I just want to throw my hat into the ring, HINDASH. I'm your girl. Hooded eyes to the max, mature skin, the whole thing. I volunteer as tribute. All right, let's talk about actually applying these shadows. So I'm going to bring, you know what, I think I'm just going to bring the video up and I will just talk while we play it because you don't need to stare at me while I'm talking about it. All right, so to start, I went in with the shade Feel and Real and then applied it as my contour. I did not have any issues in blending this out, and I think that the shade and the tone of it is perfect for my skin tone. And again, because there is a gradient, there is a little bit more of a warmer tone on the left side of the pan and certainly cooler on the right side. So because of that gradient, you really can find the undertone that you need for your own particular skin tone. And I love that about this palette. As I said earlier, these shadows are very forgiving, and so I was a little concerned that I might end up with way too much pigment on my face, and I needn't have worried. It wasn't a problem at all, and like I said, they blended out very, very easily. I think it produced a very realistic looking contour, nothing too over the top, although I could have gone in and built it up if that was the look I was going for, but I'm very happy with the results that I achieved. So then I used the top two pans for bronzer, going to the left side of tan lines at the top and heading more towards the right side of wet paint just to get a little bit more of that yellow tone in there to warm up the bronzer a bit. These shades, again, applied subtly to my skin, so I did build them up a few times by dipping back into the pan, and towards the end I omitted the more yellow shade just to focus on the brown and build up that more sun-kissed kind of look. Once I was satisfied with the bronzer, it was time to move on for blush, and that's where I took the shade Boy Wonder. And I kind of went towards the left side, but not fully all the way, just to have more of a peachy aspect rather than a stark pink. And again, you can see that it just builds up beautifully, blends out so nicely, and just leaves this beautiful, healthy looking glow on the skin and a natural looking flush. I love this as a blush, to be honest, and these powders are so incredibly soft. They pick up so nicely on the brush, but there's no fallout, there's no excessive powderiness with them. They just apply to the skin beautifully. Finally, and this isn't a step that I typically do, but I wanted to do it because I wanted to put these powders to the test, I went in with the more cream side of wet paint, mixed it with a little bit of the more white side of tan lines, and used that to highlight under my eyes. I think if I had just gone in with the white, it would have been far too harsh under my eyes. So including that cream makes it look a lot more natural on me. But again, because of the gradients in here, if you have very fair skin, there is an option for you. Likewise, if you have deep skin, there's an option for you as well. After I completed my face, I moved on to my eyes. And I started off with the shade Love Kills. And you can see that I used a fluffy brush. This one is from BK Beauty. It's the 201 brush. And I picked up the far left side of that pan. So basically the lightest of the orangey red shade. And I applied that into the crease and blended it up towards the brow bone. And as you can see, I didn't have to dip back into the pan in order to build it up, but it also didn't apply very heavily handed. I had no issues with blending this shade, and basically to spare myself the time, I'm just going to say it right now, I didn't have any issues blending any of the shades, either in this look or in other looks that I have done with this palette. I haven't come across a single stubborn shadow in this palette. Next up, I wanted to intensify the crease a little bit, so I moved over in the pan, and I took a different brush that has a bit more of a tapered end to it, and this one is the BK Beauty 202 brush. And then you can see that I applied the shadow to the crease and blended it upwards again, but not as far as I had blended that first shadow. To add some dimension to the lid and deepen up the outer portion of it, I used the shade Intrafatum, and I stuck to the left side of the pan because it's a very deep, warm brown kind of shade, and I thought that that would pair very nicely with the red tones that I already had going on. To apply it, I used a brush from Bristles Beauty, and this is the E02RL brush. I just patted that shadow onto the outer portion of my lid and then blended from there. And again, even though this is a deep tone, I had no issues blending it out. As always, I did take time between shades to go back and do additional blending. I don't always show that in my videos just for the sake of time, but just be aware that I do that. Again, to add dimension to the lid and to brighten up the inner portion of it, I applied the cream shade from Wet Paint using the Refer 02 flat shader brush. But I found that it wasn't adding enough contrast, so using the same brush, I then dipped into the white shadow in Tan Lines and patted it over the cream shade, and I was quite happy with the result of that. Then I went back to the same Bristles Beauty brush that I had used to apply that deeper shade on the outer portion of my lid, and I picked up the brown shade from Tan Lines and used that to blend where the white shadow and that deeper brown shadow met, just to produce a bit of a gradient on my lids. For lining my lower lash line, I took a MAC 221 brush and picked up part of the darker portion of Intrafatum. And you can see that I didn't take it all the way under the lower lash line. I stopped about halfway and just left it there. Then I added a little bit more of the same shade onto the outer portion of my eye again just to deepen things up and to connect those two shades so that there wasn't any sort of contrast between the upper lid and the lower. To blend out that deep shade along my lower lash line and to add some balance and bring more warmth onto that lower area, I took a Delium Tools 765 small angled shader brush and picked up that peachier shade from Boy Wonder and used that to blend the deeper shadow out. And I think that it just added the right amount of balance. It just gives a hint of warmth under the eyes without making it too harsh and stark under there. To highlight the inner corner of my eye and to bring a subtle highlight to my brow bone, I used the Refer 03 brush and again picked up that white shade from Tan Lines and applied that. Once the eyes were complete, I moved on to lips to finish out the look. I first applied the lip pencil from Gerard Cosmetics in the shade Sugar and Spice. The lipstick that I used is from Natasha Denona. It's one of her I Need a Nude lipsticks in the shade 12NB Michelle. In my opinion, this is the perfect nude lip combo. And there you have it, guys. There's the palette in action. And again, the word that keeps coming to mind is intelligent. It's just so thoughtfully put together. I love the aspect of the gradient. I was really concerned about that, and I didn't need to be. It's really not difficult to navigate, and I think it just opens this palette up to a multitude of skin tones, and I think more brands need to be taking that into consideration when they're doing eyeshadow palettes. There is certainly a call for it with base products, and I think we've been hearing that cry for years. Some brands have really stepped up to the plate in that regard. Some are woefully behind the times, but a lot of times the eyeshadow palettes, they are very much catered towards people with my complexion. I can basically grab any eyeshadow palette and it's going to work on me. And yet people who have a deeper complexion can't say the same. But with this palette, you can use this if you have a deeper skin tone. And I just really love that this is a universally applicable eyeshadow palette. Any brand, if they choose to, can invest in the best quality ingredients and creating the best quality formula. But not every brand is going to have the foresight to create a universally applicable palette like this. And I love that HINDASH also included some warm, colorful shades as well, because it just takes it from being a one-trick pony. If those weren't in there, I think that this would remind me very much of the Shade and Light palette that we saw years ago. But this, it just takes it beyond that. And of course, the concern with something that is different is that it runs the risk of being gimmicky. This is not gimmicky. When you look at this palette and really think about how it can be utilized beyond just applying as eyeshadow, it removes that element of being a gimmick. I mean, to me, a gimmick is just sort of a trick. It's something to draw people in, to sort of distract from the fact that there's no substance to whatever that item might be. This is not gimmicky. This is just very creatively put together and, again, very intelligently done. All right, with all that said, I'm going to wrap the video up here, but not before I give a huge congratulations to HINDASH. I think he has created one of those kind of palettes that's iconic. It's a product that is going to stand the test of time. He could be selling this 15 years from now and it's still going to be as relevant then as it is now. And I'm really excited to see what else he does with his brand and what comes next from him. All right, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.